The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly upward, their surfaces pulsing with the collected authority of 10,000 civilizations. Ambassador Marcus Kane stood alone at the center of the circular arena, his simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate biomechanical forms of the alien delegates surrounding him. The air itself seemed to vibrate with hostility. High Chancellor Vextar of the Thraxian Empire leaned forward on his floating throne, his 6 eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. The massive blue-skinned alien's voice boomed through the translation matrix that filled the chamber. "Human, you stand accused of violating 17 interstellar treaties, inciting rebellion among the Outer Rim colonies, and conducting unauthorized genetic experiments on sentient species." Marcus remained perfectly still, his pale hands clasped behind his back. His unremarkable appearance had always been his greatest asset. Average height, brown hair, calm gray eyes. No one ever suspected what lurked beneath the surface. Around him, hundreds of alien species filled the towering galleries. Reptilian beings with scales that shifted color based on emotion. Gaseous entities that swirled in complex patterns within containment fields. Insectoid creatures whose multifaceted eyes reflected the chamber's eerie light. "Furthermore," continued the Chancellor, his voice echoing through the vast space, "your species has been deemed a Class 7 threat to galactic stability. The Council has voted. Earth will be cleansed." A ripple of approval swept through the assembled delegates. The reptilian secthi hissed their agreement, their forked tongues tasting the air for signs of fear from the lone human. The gaseous Velnari shifted their forms in excited patterns, their collective consciousness buzzing with anticipation. The insectoid Krivik clicked their mandibles rhythmically, a sound that spoke of satisfaction at justice finally being served. Marcus tilted his head slightly, and for just a moment something flickered behind his eyes, something ancient and hungry, something that had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. "Interesting," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite speaking barely above a whisper. "And you believe this council has the authority to pass such judgment on humanity?" Chancellor Vextar's primary arm spread wide in a gesture of absolute power. His secondary arms gestured to the assembled masses of alien representatives. "We are the Galactic Council. We have ruled these stars for 50,000 years. Your species has existed for what, 200,000 years on a single world? You are insects compared to us." 200,000 years, Marcus repeated thoughtfully, beginning to pace slowly around the perimeter of the judgment circle. "Yes, that's what your intelligence reports say, isn't it? How thoroughly you've studied us, how completely you understand what humanity truly is." The chamber's atmospheric processors hummed ominously as they struggled to maintain the proper environment for hundreds of different species. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as Marcus continued his slow walk. His footsteps echoed with an odd metallic quality that seemed to resonate through the crystalline floor in ways that defied physics. Director Yala of the Korthek Collective, her cybernetic implants sparking with interference, leaned forward in her gallery. Her mechanical voice cut through the tension. "The human shows no fear. This is unusual behavior for a condemned species." "Tell me, Chancellor," Marcus continued, his voice growing softer and somehow more terrifying. "In all your millennia of rule, how many species have you encountered that willingly sent a single diplomat to face the full assembly of the Galactic Council? How many civilizations have stood alone in this chamber and shown no concern for the judgment of 10,000 worlds?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Whispers began to spread through the galleries as delegates considered the implications. It was true. No species in recorded galactic history had ever sent a lone representative to face the Council's judgment. Most brought entire fleets, armies of lawyers and diplomats, or simply refused to attend at all. "Your species' arrogance knows no bounds," spat Vextar, though something in his voice suggested the first hints of uncertainty. "Even now, facing annihilation, you show no fear." Marcus stopped walking. He turned to face the Chancellor directly, and his smile was like winter starlight. Beautiful and absolutely cold. "Fear, oh Chancellor? You misunderstand completely. I'm not here because humanity is arrogant." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Frost began to form on the surfaces of nearby monitoring equipment. Several of the more environmentally sensitive species began to show signs of distress as their life support systems struggled to compensate. "I'm here because humanity sent their most diplomatic representative." As Marcus spoke, The lights in the chamber began to flicker. The massive holographic displays that showed the positions of Council fleets throughout the galaxy wavered and distorted. Several of the more psychically sensitive delegates suddenly recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. Their panicked movements sent ripples of confusion through the assembled masses. Prime Minister Corvin of the Deltarian Federation, his crystalline body resonating with harmonic frequencies of distress, spoke up from his platform. The energy readings are impossible. Our sensors are detecting massive fluctuations in local space-time. What is this creature? Marcus turned his attention to the crystalline being, and his gray eyes seemed to reflect depths that shouldn't exist in a human face. Creature? Prime Minister, I'm hurt. I prefer the term gardener. The word fell into the chamber like a stone into still water, sending waves of implication through the collective consciousness of the assembled delegates. Ancient memories stirred. Half-forgotten legends whispered in the back of racial memories. Stories that every species told their young about the Watchers in the dark, the Shapers of Destiny, the Gardeners of the Galaxy. Chancellor Vexitar's 6 eyes widened as comprehension began to dawn. His voice came out as barely a whisper. No. The Eternal Watchers are myth, legend, stories told to children. Marcus's smile widened, and for a brief moment his form seemed to shimmer. In that instant, every delegate in the chamber saw something else standing in the judgment circle. Something vast and patient and utterly alien despite its human appearance. Something that had been watching and waiting and tending the galaxy's growth since before their oldest civilizations had developed language. Are we? Marcus asked mildly, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere at once. Tell me, Chancellor, what do you suppose happens when you declare war on the species that has been protecting you since before your ancestors learned to make fire? What occurs when you threaten the home planet of the gardeners who have been carefully, patiently ensuring that galactic civilization develops in a way that promotes life, growth, and peace? The emergency lighting systems activated throughout the chamber as the main power grid began to fluctuate wildly. In the strobing red light, Marcus's shadow seemed to extend far beyond what the illumination should have produced. Several delegates began backing away from the judgment circle, their survival instincts finally overriding their political posturing. What happens? Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper that somehow reached every corner of the vast chamber. When you attack the gardeners, the lights went out completely. In the absolute darkness that followed, something vast and ancient shifted in the space where Marcus had been standing. The very air seemed to thicken with the presence of something that predated the formation of stars. And in that moment of perfect blackness, the Galactic Council finally began to understand just how catastrophically they had miscalculated. When the emergency power systems finally restored minimal lighting to the chamber, Marcus stood exactly where he had been, appearing completely human once again, but now every delegate in the vast assembly could feel it. The crushing weight of eons, the patient authority of a species that had been shepherding galactic civilization since before time had meaning. The age of humanity's hidden guidance was about to end, and the Galactic Council was about to learn what it truly meant to face the judgment of the universe's eldest gardeners. The emergency containment fields around Marcus flickered to life as the Council's security systems detected an unprecedented energy signature emanating from the human diplomat. Red warning lights bathed the chamber in an ominous glow, but Marcus seemed utterly unaffected by the crackling barrier of pure energy surrounding him. The massive holographic displays throughout the chamber showed readings that defied every known law of physics. Director Yala of the Korthek Collective, her cybernetic implants sparking violently with interference, leaned forward in alarm. Her mechanical voice stuttered as her translation systems struggled to process what her sensors were telling her. Impossible. Our sensors are detecting chronoton displacement around the human. His temporal signature is wrong. Completely wrong. Marcus clasped his hands behind his back again, his posture still perfectly diplomatic despite the chaos erupting around him. The containment field crackled and hissed, but he stood within it as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Director Yala, isn't it? Your people have always been fascinated by time, haven't you? Tell them what your instruments are showing. The director's multiple optical sensors whirred as they focused on Marcus, their mechanical lenses adjusting and readjusting as they tried to make sense of the readings. Her voice came out in a mechanical stutter that echoed through the chamber's translation matrix. The readings are indicating this individual has existed for approximately 14 billion years. But that's impossible. The universe itself is only 13.8 billion years old. A stunned silence fell over the chamber like a physical weight. Even the constantly chattering pixely swarm went quiet. Their usual buzzing reduced to an ominous whisper. Thousands of alien eyes fixed on the lone human standing calmly within the energy barrier that should have been powerful enough to contain a small star. Chancellor Vexitar's 6 eyes narrowed dangerously, though his voice carried the first hints of uncertainty. Preposterous. Some kind of human technology designed to fool our sensors. They're trying to buy time with elaborate deceptions. Guards, increase containment field strength to maximum. The energy barriers around Marcus intensified until they were blinding to look at directly. The air itself screamed with the power being channeled into the containment system. Nearby monitoring equipment began to overload and fail as the electromagnetic interference reached critical levels. The very structure of the chamber groaned under the strain of containing so much raw energy. Marcus didn't even blink. He stood perfectly still within the raging storm of contained force, as calm as if he were attending a casual diplomatic reception. "You know," he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than facing the concentrated power of an entire galactic civilization, "humanity has had many names throughout your recorded history. We've been quite patient, actually, watching, learning, occasionally intervening when things got too far out of hand." The Sekthai ambassador, Lord Krex, uncoiled his massive serpentine form from his platform. His scales shifted through a spectrum of colors that indicated extreme agitation among his species. His forked tongue tasted the air, seeking chemical traces of deception or fear. "What are you implying, human? Speak plainly or face the consequences of your riddles." "Oh, not implying," Lord Krex, stating quite directly. Marcus looked up at the towering reptilian with mild interest, his gray eyes reflecting something vast and patient. "Your people once had a beautiful homeworld, didn't they? Before the civil wars, before the poisoned atmosphere. What was it called again? Sekthara Prime?" Krex's massive form went rigid with shock. His scales cycled rapidly through colors that spoke of confusion, fear, and dawning horror. The great serpent's voice came out as barely a hiss. "How could you possibly know that name? Those records were destroyed millions of years ago. Every trace of our original world was erased from galactic databases during the Great Purge. Were they?" Marcus asked with genuine curiosity, tilting his head slightly. "Or were they simply archived somewhere safe? You see, Lord Krex, your people weren't the first to develop that particular form of atmospheric terraforming technology. They were, however, the first to survive it. Others weren't so fortunate." The massive reptilian's voice dropped to a threatening hiss that reverberated through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Explain yourself, human. How do you know of technologies that predate recorded galactic history?" Marcus turned his attention to the gaseous Velnari representative, whose swirling form occupied a specialized containment platform designed to give their species physical coherence. "Ambassador Flux, your people have an interesting creation myth, don't they? Something about ancient guardians who walked between the stars maintaining balance, ensuring that no single species became too aggressive or expansionist." The Velnari's gaseous form began to swirl more rapidly, their patterns indicating deep distress. Their collective voice emerged from speakers throughout their platform, harmonizing in ways that spoke of racial memory being triggered. The song of the Eternal Watchers. But those are just stories. Legends passed down through our collective consciousness across millions of years. Myths to explain the inexplicable patterns of galactic development. Are they? Marcus's smile widened slightly, and for a moment the containment field around him flickered. In that instant, several delegates swore they saw his form shimmer and change, becoming something far larger and more terrible than a simple human diplomat. "Tell me, what did these Eternal Watchers look like in your oldest songs?" The chamber's atmospheric processors strained as Ambassador Flux's form expanded with emotion, their gaseous body pressing against the limits of their containment system. They appeared as whatever form was needed, sometimes light, sometimes shadow, sometimes as members of the species they were guiding. The Velnari's form suddenly collapsed inward as the full implications struck their collective consciousness, sometimes as simple diplomats sent to speak for their people in moments of crisis. The containment field around Marcus began to fluctuate wildly. Through the energy distortion, his form seemed to shift and waver, as if reality itself couldn't quite decide what it was looking at. The very air around him began to shimmer with heat distortions that had nothing to do with temperature. Queen Vesica of the Krivik swarm, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaotic light from the failing containment system, clicked her mandibles in patterns that indicated terminal fear. The old warnings. The genetic memories passed down through our breeding cycles. They spoke of gardeners who tended the galaxy like a vast ecosystem, ensuring balance, preventing any one species from dominating all others. What are you? Chancellor Vextar demanded, his voice cracking with the first hint of genuine fear. All 6 of his eyes were now fixed on Marcus, and what he saw there made his ancient blood run cold. Marcus looked around the chamber at the thousands of delegates, his gray eyes reflecting something vast and patient and utterly alien. Despite his human appearance, the smile that played across his lips held the weight of geological ages and the cold patience of interstellar space. I'm exactly what humanity told you I was, Chancellor. I'm their diplomat. The lights in the chamber began to die one by one, leaving only the failing glow of the containment field to illuminate Marcus's increasingly unsettling presence. In the growing darkness, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the crystalline structure of the chamber itself. But perhaps I should have mentioned that I've been practicing diplomacy for a very, very long time. As he spoke, the containment field finally collapsed entirely, its generators unable to maintain coherence in the face of whatever Marcus was becoming. The emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging the chamber into near-total darkness. In that blackness, something vast and ancient stirred, and the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council finally began to understand that they weren't facing a simple human representative. They were facing judgment from the universe's eldest gardener, and their verdict had already been decided long before they had entered this chamber. The chamber plunged into near-total darkness as the Council's primary power grid suffered cascading failures throughout the massive station. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the crystalline walls, and in that dim illumination, Marcus seemed to exist in perfect clarity, while everything else appeared somehow less real. The very fabric of space around him seemed to bend and warp, as if his presence was too significant for normal reality to contain. Archon Zephyr of the Luminary Conclave manifested their consciousness more fully than they had in millennia. The beings of pure energy had transcended physical form eons ago, but now their glowing essence condensed into something approaching visibility as they struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Impossible. We are among the oldest civilizations in this galaxy. We have existed as pure consciousness for 12 million years. We would have detected your presence long ago. Marcus turned his attention to the glowing energy being, and for the first time, his diplomatic composure showed the faintest crack of what might have been amusement. The expression was subtle, but it carried the weight of vast experience and knowledge that dwarfed the accumulated wisdom of entire civilizations. Would you, Archon? Your people ascended roughly 12 million years ago, correct? Very impressive. Tell me, do you remember what convinced your species to abandon physical existence? The luminary's energy form pulsed with patterns that could only be described as confusion. Their collective voice emerged from speakers throughout the chamber, harmonizing in frequencies that spoke of deep racial memory being accessed. The Great Dying, a cascade of supernovas that threatened to sterilize our entire sector. Our scientists calculated that transcendence was the only path to survival. 17 stars in sequence, creating a chain reaction that would have destroyed everything we had built. Ah yes, the Vega Sector incident. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing a mildly interesting historical footnote. 17 stars going supernova in sequence. Highly unusual stellar behavior, wouldn't you agree? Almost as if something had been carefully encouraging certain gravitational instabilities. Archon Zephyr's form began to fluctuate wildly, their energy patterns becoming chaotic as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. You're suggesting those supernovas were artificial? But the energy requirements alone would be beyond the capabilities of any known technology. The precision needed to trigger such a cascade would be well within the capabilities of a species that had been managing stellar mechanics for several billion years. Marcus finished quietly. The question is, Archon, why would anyone go to such lengths to force the luminary to evolve beyond physical existence? What purpose could such intervention serve? The emergency lighting flickered, and in the brief moments of darkness, delegates throughout the chamber swore they could see Marcus in perfect detail, as if he were somehow generating his own light, or perhaps existing outside the normal flow of photons entirely. When the lights returned, his shadow seemed to extend far beyond what the illumination should have produced. Prime Minister Corvin of the Deltarian Federation, his crystalline body resonating with harmonic frequencies of distress that filled the chamber with an ominous musical accompaniment, spoke up from his platform. The ancient archives speak of the sculptors, beings who shaped the galaxy's development over cosmic timescales, but they were myth, legend, stories told by our ancestors to explain patterns they couldn't understand. Were we? Marcus asked mildly, and the simple question carried enough weight to make the massive chamber's structure groan. Under some invisible pressure, the temperature in the chamber dropped so rapidly that several species' breath began to mist, and ice crystals started forming on the surfaces of monitoring equipment. The life support systems struggled frantically to compensate for the sudden environmental changes that seemed to defy the laws of thermodynamics. Admiral Thrax of the Hegemony War Fleet, his scarred exoskeleton gleaming in the unstable lighting, activated his personal combat shields and reached for his plasma sidearm. Enough games, creature. Whatever you are, you're still only one being. The Galactic Defense Force has over 10 million ships positioned throughout this system. Your threats mean nothing. Marcus turned to regard the military commander with what appeared to be genuine interest, his gray eyes reflecting something that might have been amusement. Admiral, how long have you held your position as Supreme Military Commander? 47 years of distinguished service, Thrax replied proudly, though his weapon trembled slightly in his grasp as he faced the impossible readings his armor's sensors were providing. I've commanded fleets in 16 major conflicts and never known defeat. Impressive record. In that time, have you ever wondered why the hegemony's expansion was always met with just enough resistance to halt it? Why your enemies always seem to have precisely the right technology to counter your advances? Why certain strategic intelligence always seemed to leak at exactly the right moments to prevent total victory? Thrax's compound eyes widened as implications cascaded through his tactical analysis centers. His voice came out as barely a whisper. The Battle of Kepler Station, the Rimworld Uprising, the Neutron Star Gambit. You're saying those weren't natural developments of warfare? All carefully orchestrated to maintain balance, the Marcus confirmed gently. Your species has remarkable strategic capabilities, Admiral. Left unchecked, you would have conquered half the galaxy within 3 centuries. That would have been problematic for the other developing civilizations. So we arranged for certain obstacles to appear at precisely the right moments. Director Yala's cybernetic implants sparked again as she processed this information, her mechanical systems overloading as they tried to compute the implications. You're saying every major conflict in recorded galactic history has been manipulated by your species? Every war, every peace treaty, every technological breakthrough? Not manipulated, Marcus corrected gently, his voice carrying the patience of someone who had explained this concept many times before. Guided. Balanced. We've never created conflicts that weren't already brewing in the hearts and minds of your people. We simply ensured they concluded in ways that promoted long-term stability rather than total domination by any single species. Archon Zephyr's energy form pulsed with what could only be described as intellectual vertigo. The philosophical implications are staggering. If your species has been guiding galactic development for billions of years, then every achievement, every breakthrough, every moment of progress we thought was our own, has been genuinely yours, Marcus assured the luminary, his voice warming slightly. We don't create advancement, Archon. We simply prevent certain forms of regression. The sciences you've developed, the art you've created, the cultures you've built, all of that is authentically your own accomplishment. We're more like cosmic gardeners. We don't make the flowers grow, but we do remove the weeds that might choke them. Queen Vesica's swarm buzzed in agitated patterns that filled the chamber with an ominous, harmonic undertone. But why? What could motivate a species to spend billions of years shepherding others? What possible benefit could such a commitment provide? For the first time since the session began, Marcus looked genuinely contemplative. His expression softened in a way that made him appear almost human again, despite the impossible energies swirling around him. Have you ever watched a seed become a tree, Queen Vesica? Watched it struggle through soil and weather and seasons, never knowing if it will survive to bloom? There's something profound about witnessing potential become reality, about seeing consciousness emerge from chaos, art bloom from survival, wisdom grow from conflict. He gestured around the chamber at the assembled representatives, and for a moment his voice carried something that might have been pride. Look at what you've accomplished. The Thraxian mathematical theorems that revolutionized quantum mechanics, the Korthic Collective's temporal research that revealed the true nature of causality, the Luminaries' consciousness studies that proved the existence of soul energy, the Krivik's collective intelligence, models that solved the communication paradox between individual and group consciousness. Marcus's voice took on a quality that resonated through the chamber's crystalline structure like a bell. Each of your species has contributed something unique and irreplaceable to the galactic community, something that never could have emerged without your specific evolutionary path, your particular struggles and triumphs. Chancellor Vextar, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. And humanity? What is your contribution to this galactic garden you speak of? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he answered, his voice carried the weight of eons and the cold patience of interstellar space. We remember. We watch. We ensure that the garden continues to grow, that no single plant overshadows all the others, that the ecosystem remains healthy and diverse. His gray eyes met each delegate's gaze in turn, and what they saw there made their ancient blood run cold. And when necessary, we prune back the growth that threatens to choke out everything else. The implications of that statement settled over the chamber like a shroud. When the emergency power finally stabilized and light returned to the chamber, Marcus stood exactly where he had been, appearing completely human once again. But now every delegate in the chamber could feel it like a physical weight pressing down on them, the vast patient presence that had been masquerading as a simple diplomat. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with an authority that made the Council's accumulated power feel like a child's plaything. Admiral Thrax of the Hegemony Warfleet, his scarred exoskeleton gleaming in the restored lighting, kept his personal combat shields active, and his plasma sidearm trained on the human diplomat. Enough games, creature. Whatever you are, you're still only one being. The Galactic Defense Force has over 10 million ships positioned throughout this system. Even if your claims are true, you cannot stand against the combined might of every civilization in this galaxy. Marcus turned to regard the military commander with what appeared to be genuine interest, his head tilting slightly as if he were studying a particularly fascinating specimen. Admiral, how long have you held your position as Supreme Military Commander of the Hegemony Forces? 47 years of distinguished service, Thrax replied proudly, though his weapon trembled slightly in his grasp as every sensor in his armor screamed warnings about the energy signatures emanating from the seemingly ordinary human. I've commanded fleets in 16 major conflicts and never known defeat. Impressive record. In that time, have you ever wondered why the hegemony's expansion was always met with just enough resistance to halt it? Why your enemies always seem to have precisely the right technology to counter your advances? Why certain strategic intelligence always seemed to leak at exactly the right moments to prevent total victory? Thrax's compound eyes widened as implications cascaded through his tactical analysis centers. His military mind, trained for decades to recognize patterns and strategic advantages, suddenly saw the threads that connected every major conflict of his career. The Battle of Kepler Station. The enemy had advance warning of our tactical approach. The Rimworld uprising. Somehow they obtained blueprints for our newest weapon systems. The neutron star gambit. Our communication frequencies were compromised at the exact moment we needed surprise. All carefully orchestrated to maintain balance, Marcus confirmed gently, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing routine maintenance, rather than the manipulation of galactic-scale conflicts. Your species has remarkable strategic capabilities, Admiral. Left unchecked, you would have conquered half the galaxy within 3 centuries. That would have been problematic for the other developing civilizations, so we arranged for certain obstacles to appear at precisely the right moments. Director Yala's cybernetic implants sparked again as she processed this information, her mechanical systems overloading as they tried to compute the implications of systematic intervention across billions of years. You're saying every major conflict in recorded galactic history has been manipulated by your species? Every war, every peace treaty, every technological breakthrough has been guided by human intervention? Not manipulated, Marcus corrected gently, his voice carrying the patience of someone who had explained this concept countless times across millennia. Guided, balanced. We've never created conflicts that weren't already brewing in the hearts and minds of your people. We simply ensured they concluded in ways that promoted long-term stability rather than total domination by any single species. Archon, Zephyr's energy form pulsed with patterns that could only be described as intellectual vertigo. Their collective consciousness struggled to process the magnitude of what they were learning. The philosophical implications are staggering. If your species has been guiding galactic development for billions of years, then every achievement, every breakthrough, every moment of progress we thought was our own has been genuinely yours, Marcus assured the luminary, his voice warming slightly with what might have been affection. We don't create advancement, Archon. We simply prevent certain forms of regression. The sciences you've developed, the art you've created, the cultures you've built, all of that is authentically your own accomplishment. We're more like cosmic gardeners. We don't make the flowers grow, but we do remove the weeds that might choke them. Queen Vesica's swarm buzzed in agitated patterns that filled the chamber with an ominous harmonic undertone. Her collective voice emerged from thousands of individual creatures speaking in perfect unison. But why reveal yourselves now? Why break the ancient compact of secrecy? What has changed to force this revelation? Marcus's expression grew serious, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of impending judgment. Because, Queen Vesica, you just voted to cleanse our homeworld. You declared war on the species that has been protecting you since before your oldest ancestors developed language. You have forced our hand. The chamber fell into absolute silence except for the sound of various life support systems struggling to compensate for the reality distortions occurring around the human diplomat. Several delegates began backing away from the judgment circle, their survival instincts finally overriding their political posturing. Prime Minister Corvin of the Deltarian Federation, his crystalline body resonating with frequencies that spoke of deep fear, managed to find his voice. Surely there must be some way to resolve this peacefully. The vote can be rescinded. The fleets can be recalled. We acted in ignorance, not malice, can they? Marcus asked mildly, his gray eyes now seeming to hold depths that reflected the darkness between stars. Admiral Thrax, how many ships in your fleet are currently moving toward Earth's solar system? Thrax's exoskeleton clicked as he accessed his command interface. 12,000 heavy cruisers, 40,000 destroyers, and 600 dreadnoughts. Standard cleansing formation. His voice trailed off as he realized what he was admitting to. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And Chancellor Vextar, how many other species have committed forces to this operation? The Chancellor's 6 eyes shifted nervously as he consulted his own displays. 437 species have contributed ships to the cleansing fleet. Total combined force is approximately 2.7 million vessels. 2.7 million ships, Marcus repeated softly, all moving toward a single star system to eliminate what you perceive as a threat to galactic stability. He paused, and his smile was like winter dawn, beautiful and terrible. Tell me, what do you suppose happens when 2.7 million ships arrive at the home system of a species that has been managing galactic affairs for billions of years? Director Yala's optical sensors whirred frantically as they tried to focus on Marcus, but her readings made no sense. The temporal distortions around you are intensifying. Our instruments are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the solar system. It's as if space itself is responding to your presence. Space has been responding to human presence for a very long time, Director, Marcus replied. We've simply been polite about it until now. Ambassador Flux of the Velnari suddenly expanded their gaseous form in alarm. The defense grids, the automated systems that protect every major world in the galaxy, they're all showing the same technological signatures, the same energy patterns, the same design philosophy. Marcus's smile widened slightly. Very good, Ambassador. Yes, we've been maintaining the Galactic Defense Network for quite some time. It seemed like a reasonable precaution, given how often species discover weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Every world in the galaxy was protected by technology they had assumed was their own. Technology that had been quietly, patiently installed and maintained by the species they had just declared war upon. Queen Vesica's swarm began to buzz in patterns that indicated terminal fear. Our worlds, our defenses, our technology, how much of what we consider our own achievements actually belongs to humanity. The achievements are yours, Marcus assured her. The infrastructure that allows those achievements to flourish safely, that's been our contribution. Think of us as the foundation beneath the garden, invisible but essential. Chancellor Vextar's voice came out as barely a whisper. What are you going to do to us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he answered, his voice carried the cold finality of geological time. That, Chancellor, depends entirely on what you do next. The fleets approaching Earth have approximately 14 hours before they reach weapons range. In that time, you have a choice to make. The lights in the chamber dimmed again, and in the growing darkness, Marcus's presence seemed to expand until it filled the vast space. You can recall those fleets, rescind the vote, and enter into a new era of open cooperation with humanity. Or you can proceed with your plan and discover what happens when gardeners decide that certain weeds need to be removed permanently. His gray eyes swept across the assembled delegates, and what they saw there made them understand that they weren't just facing the judgment of a single being. They were facing the collective will of the universe's eldest civilization, and their patience had finally reached its end. The council chamber remained frozen in terrified silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of Marcus's ultimatum hung in the air like a physical presence, pressing down on every delegate with the inevitability of cosmic judgment. Finally, Chancellor Vexitar, his 6 eyes now dim with the weight of comprehension, slowly descended from his floating throne. With movements that spoke of profound humility, he approached the judgment circle where Marcus stood waiting. Ambassador Kane, the Chancellor said, his voice stripped of all its former arrogance and authority, the Council formally withdraws its declaration against Earth and humanity. We beg your forgiveness for our ignorance and our arrogance. We acted without understanding the true nature of the forces we were confronting. Marcus nodded gravely, his expression softening slightly. Accepted, Chancellor. Though I think we need to have a more comprehensive discussion about how galactic governance will proceed from this point forward. The age of hidden guidance is ending, whether we wished it to or not. Director Yala's cybernetic systems whirred as she processed probabilities and outcomes, her mechanical mind struggling to adapt to a universe that had suddenly become far more complex than any of them had imagined. You're not going to destroy us? After what we attempted, surely some form of retaliation is warranted. Director, in 14 billion years of shepherding galactic development, do you know how many species we've been forced to completely eliminate? Marcus asked, his voice carrying the weight of vast experience and difficult decisions. How many? Queen Vesica inquired, her swarm patterns indicating intense curiosity mixed with dread. The collective intelligence of her species was frantically trying to calculate their odds of survival. 3, Marcus replied simply, and the number fell into the chamber like a stone into still water, and in each case they had become so fundamentally aggressive and expansionist that they posed an existential threat to all other life in the galaxy. Even then we preserved genetic samples and cultural archives. Nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. Admiral Thrax slowly holstered his weapon, his tactical mind racing through the implications. But surely our attack on your diplomat, our threat to your homeworld warrants some form of consequence. In any military organization, such actions would demand retaliation. Marcus's expression became almost amused, and for a moment he seemed entirely human again, rather than the cosmic force he had revealed himself to be. Admiral, you attacked a being who has personally witnessed the birth and death of stars, who helped guide the development of consciousness itself, who has been practicing diplomacy since before your sun ignited. Did you really think a few energy barriers and threatening postures would constitute a meaningful attack? Archon Zephyr's energy form pulsed thoughtfully, their collective consciousness processing the magnitude of their miscalculation. Then what happens now? How do we proceed knowing what we know? How do we govern a galaxy when we've discovered that our eldest member has been secretly managing our development for eons? Ah, Marcus said, his diplomatic smile returning for the first time since the session began. Now we establish what I like to call the New Covenant. The age of humanity's hidden guidance is over, ended by your own actions. It's time for a more collaborative approach to galactic stewardship, he gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing star charts, population analyses, resource distributions, and developmental indices that were far more detailed and comprehensive than anything in the Council's databases. The information revealed patterns and connections that no single species could have compiled alone. You see, the galaxy is approaching a critical transition point, Marcus continued, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher addressing particularly bright students. In approximately 50,000 years, the first extragalactic visitors will arrive. Other gardener species from distant star clusters, each with their own protected civilizations. How this galaxy's species handle that contact will determine whether we enter a new era of intergalactic cooperation or face the first truly existential conflict humanity has encountered. Prime Minister Corvin's crystalline form resonated with harmonics of understanding, his species' natural ability to perceive complex patterns, allowing him to grasp the implications faster than most. You're preparing us. Everything. The guided conflicts, the technological development, even this revelation, it's all been preparation for something larger. Precisely, Marcus confirmed, his approval evident. Your species have grown remarkable in isolation. The Thraxian strategic thinking, the Korthek temporal understanding, the Luminari energy mastery, the Krivik collective consciousness, the Sekthai biological adaptation capabilities, all of these will be crucial when we make contact with other galactic civilizations. Chancellor Vextar's primary arms spread in a gesture of acceptance and submission. What do you need from us? How can we make amends for our actions and contribute to this larger purpose? Partnership, Marcus replied, and the word carried weight that resonated through the chamber's crystalline structure. Open cooperation instead of hidden guidance. Humanity will take our place as public members of the Galactic Council, sharing our knowledge and experience directly. In return, you help us prepare this galaxy for its next phase of development. Director Yala leaned forward, her optical sensors focusing intently on the human diplomat. And Earth? What of humanity's homeworld? Surely it holds secrets and technologies that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. Marcus's expression grew warm with something that might have been genuine affection for his species' birth world. Earth remains what it has always been, the garden where humanity learned to cultivate life. It will be protected, but more importantly, it will become the galaxy's first interspecies collaborative research facility. Every civilization will have the opportunity to study there, to contribute to the collective knowledge base we'll need for the challenges ahead. Queen Vesica's mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated acceptance mixed with lingering uncertainty. And if we refuse this partnership? If some species choose not to participate in this new arrangement? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the vast patience of geological time. Queen Vesica, in 14 billion years we have learned that forced cooperation produces nothing of value. If any species chooses not to participate in this new arrangement, they will be free to develop as they see fit within their current territories. However, he gestured to the star charts around them, and the displays shifted to show vast regions of unexplored space beyond the galactic rim. The universe is vast and full of wonders you haven't yet imagined. The choice is between growth as part of something larger, or stagnation in isolation. We found that most species, given time and information, make the choice that serves their long-term interests. Admiral Thrax stepped forward, his combat posture replaced by something that might have been respect. His military mind was already processing the strategic implications of alliance with a species that had been managing galactic conflicts for billions of years. How do we begin this partnership? What are the first steps in this new era of cooperation? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the session began, it was entirely human and entirely genuine. Admiral, we begin exactly as we have for billions of years. One conversation at a time, one choice at a time, one step forward into an unknown but promising future. The emergency lighting fully restored itself, bathing the chamber in warm, natural illumination that seemed to wash away the terror and uncertainty of the previous hours. Around the great circle, delegates began to relax for the first time since the session began, their survival instincts finally allowing them to consider possibilities beyond immediate extinction. Ambassador Flux of the Velnari swirled in patterns that indicated hope and anticipation. The Song of the Eternal Watchers speaks of a time when the gardeners would reveal themselves and guide their charges into a new age of growth and expansion. Perhaps that time has finally come. Marcus nodded, his gray eyes reflecting something that might have been pride in the species he had helped nurture. The songs of your people have always been remarkably accurate, Ambassador. Your collective memory preserved truths that individual consciousness might have forgotten. Ladies, gentlemen, and entities of the Galactic Council, Marcus said, returning to his formal diplomatic posture, I believe we have a great deal of work to do. The fleets approaching Earth will need to be recalled and repurposed. Defense networks will need to be upgraded for threats from beyond our galaxy. Most importantly, We need to establish new protocols for interspecies cooperation on a scale never before attempted. He paused, looking around the vast chamber at representatives of hundreds of civilizations, each now understanding their place in a much larger cosmic order. Shall we begin? As the council members began to murmur among themselves, processing the magnitude of the revelation and the possibilities it opened, none of them noticed that Marcus's shadow seemed to extend far beyond what the lighting should have produced. None saw that his reflection in the chamber's crystalline walls,